Thank you very much. I would like to ask the speakers to come to the podium to receive questions from the audience, and I would like to open the floor for the audience to have questions. We'll limit the questions to 5 questions, and after that we can continue during the lunch break with other questions. Anyone has questions, please? Any questions to our speakers? Yes, please. Mike here, please.
Hi, I have a quick question for Michael Volk. Could you maybe explain a little bit more about the facade system, the PV facade system you mentioned very briefly?
Is this mic on? Yeah. On the high-rise building, the one with the kind of feathered or armored-looking facade, it's a thin film PV that's basically just bonded to an aluminum panel. And these are then deployed over the facade. As I mentioned, the angle of them is optimized based on the orientation of the tower, but it's the current thin film PV technology. The total shape of the tower is optimized for the wind to try to reduce the wind, the curving edges and that kind of thing. The shape, the orientation of the individual panels of the second skin is optimized for the solar harvesting.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions? Okay.
I have a question for Abbas, Aminmansour. I would like to know how do you think it will be possible to integrate also the other aspects of the sustainability of a tall building for them to become something mandatory for the building industry?
What do you mean by other aspects?
I mean, you also talked about the life cycle of a building, the embodied energy, the type of structural system that you can choose, and so on. Use the mic, please.
One thing is that I personally don't believe in these ratings and rankings and things like that. I think if professionals design the best performing buildings, then we don't have to worry about any of these terminologies. In my view, a responsible design is a sustainable design. So if we design responsibly, we don't have to worry about any of these. Whether some, the point is to recognize the fact that the sustainability impact of tall buildings is not limited to their physical size and performance. They have a wider impact, and as long as we recognize that, they do have a big impact in terms of sustainability, and I think that's my view. In my view, that's as far as I would go. I mean, we don't have to formalize it. It does need to be recognized. This does need to be recognized. People need to understand the wider impact. But I don't know if I would worry too much about changing everyone's opinion.
But frankly, for instance, in the last presentation that we saw about the use of water,
right.
I see that very important results can be achieved.
Absolutely.
But that was done just because they were sensitive about this topic. And I think that if we can find a way to have all the designers to think about those issues.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you put your finger on it. It's a thinking, a way of thinking. We need to go beyond this. How much energy does this building use per square foot, per whatever? We need to go beyond this, look at the big picture. And if we do, and if we utilize all these methods, water consumption, recycling of condensation is one example. If we, like I said, if we design the best performing buildings, we don't have to worry about any of these rankings or ratings or who thinks what. That's the thing. That's the responsible thing to do for professionals. So. Exploration. I mean, it's a little difficult to suddenly, a few minutes before your presentation, find out you're losing 25 to 30% of your time. So you really lose coherence of your presentation. I did have some other slides that would have probably help put things in a better perspective. But we need to look holistically. We need to think holistically. We also need to think in terms of future. We just heard a presentation about water consumption. That may not be a big issue right now, but in the future, it will be a very serious issue. There may be other measures that you can take, other design considerations that you could consider that may not make a lot of sense right now, may not even make economic sense right now, but they would be significantly important in the future.
I would probably contest your position. I kind of view your position as a little bit idealistic. I think, I'm an architect. I'm out here actually consulting on a large sustainability ethos for the third largest construction company in Korea. And there's a huge resistance to the message. And if you want to make a huge...
Message being...
Excuse me?
Oh, it's fine now? Okay.
No, but if you want to make a huge conversion, there's something to be said about adding a little bit of sugar to the medicine, to the pill. And, I think it's fine for us to all be here to talk about these systems and all the ethics and all the design criticality that drives us, that join us together. But at the end of the day, we still have to deal with an environment and a culture that is somewhat resistant, that relies on a marketing angle. And if you're just basically strategic enough to actually kind of parlay that for your own need, I think that's a much smarter way of integrating two binary and oppositional forces, that of the money, the developers, the business guys, the theme counters, versus those who are actually here with us in this room. Right. And I don't think right now, especially in Asia, you can't place yourself on a one-to-one position. It's like, okay, I'm not going to deal with the branding of the LEED or the GBTC or the green points because it's not about that. I agree with you on a matter of principle. Right. But this is what basically gets these projects going. This is what allows huge green conferences to happen all over the world. And in the end, basically, you just have to get this money coming in.
You're absolutely right in that in the end, the client decides how much money they want to spend and what they want you to do with their...
They're scared and they're vulnerable.
Some of them are, but there are also some very progressive clients who understand and think the same way that you think. As a professional, and I have to admit, I'm not a practitioner, so I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I think if you try to convince your client why your particular design or certain features of your design are important in terms of a more responsible design, in terms of long-term benefits, perhaps they will agree with it. If they didn't agree with it, then I guess you have an obligation to offer them a design that is acceptable to them. And that happens a lot.
I think right now the big trend I'm seeing here in Asia is not so much on a content-based argument, but it's on basically, it's kind of like a Trojan horse attitude, right?
Right.
To strategically educate the architect.
Right, and I certainly I didn't mean to suggest, and I hope no one got the impression that we should tell clients that this is, what you should do in an insensitive way. But again, if you can educate the client to understand why you're offering a certain feature as part of your design, that would be great. But in the end, if they don't want that, if they don't want to reuse the water, the condensation, for example, there was a presentation yesterday or the day before, a very large amount of water, I can't remember the number. In the end, if they don't want to do that, that's their project and that's their money. Until we all become very desperate.
Other questions?
I also have a comment on this ranking and rating systems. That while I agree some with you that some of these systems are branding and do not really achieve their goals unless the building is in operation, especially ranking before operation, which is something that is expected, but many of them, they lack the issue of socio-cultural sustainability. They focus on environmental, economic, but when it comes to socio-cultural sustainability, it becomes a quick and very brief. But still, on the other side, I still believe that there is these ranking and rating systems, they provide the minimum, not the maximum, and they also provide us with checks and balances between different buildings and certain strategies that we all adhere to and can compare and relate buildings to each other. They are not necessarily a target, but they are a process, not a product. And of course, the most important is what happens after the building gets built, not to have the plate before it's built, not the plate 10 years or maybe 5 years after it is constructed. Yeah. So that.
You're right. I would make 2 or 3 comments. One is that, by the way, parenthetically, this is not the comment in response to your question, there are seminars taking place around the U.S. now, starting to pop up, by attorneys presenting how some people got in serious trouble because they made commitments and promises when they contracted with the client, with the owner, I'm going to deliver such and such, and it didn't turn out that way. My 2 comments are, one is, I did say in one of my slides earlier on that I was hoping this would be a thought-provoking discussion, and apparently that is being accomplished. So I'm very delighted to have the questions that are coming in. As far going back to your comment about the measuring stick, and I did say that there's nothing wrong with measuring the amount of energy used by one building by whatever unit we establish and compare build. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when that becomes the goal, when we lose perspective, when the goal is to get more points so that you can get your building certified as a gold or silver or whatever the case may be, that is wrong. There's nothing wrong with having measures. And in fact, I'm suggesting, one of my slides that I skipped was maybe we need to have different evaluation system for tall buildings. LEEDs, for example, right now you get credit if the material are delivered to the job site within less than 500 miles. So this obviously has to do with transportation and fuel consumption and pollution and all this. How about the other way around? How about saying that tall buildings reduce the amount of traffic, they reduce the amount of fuel consumption, they reduce the amount of pollution that is created, they reduce the amount of road erosion and need for maintenance, and therefore they need to get credit. So all I'm saying is that 2 things. One, when we talk about measuring sticks, and I do believe that they're helpful, when we talk about that, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the goal is not to get points. The goal is to develop and design and develop high-performing buildings. And 2, like I said, it's very unfortunate that sometimes we lose sight of the bottom line, which is, again, designing and developing high-performing buildings. I have no problems with having evaluation systems and measuring criteria. They're very, very helpful. So I'm not totally against it. I'm not in favor of the way it is being done right now in some countries.
Thank you very much, and we are very glad to have the session ending on time, and we'd like to ask you to continue the discussion during the lunch break, and as we mentioned before, next session will start exactly at 2 o'clock as scheduled, so the lunch break will be only 50 minutes. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thanks to our speakers for their wonderful presentations.